Hello students, hope you may have got some sort of help from my previous video of English revision. So here is another video on the same chapter with remaining part. So again I would say, as already you got the summary of this video in the beginning, but the reading of the chapter as well explanation will provide you more understanding. Students, listen it carefully. Let's begin. Children, in my previous video, I read up to the page number 11. Now, let me explain page 11, which was left to be explained. So, here we see the author read the letter. The owner of the desk must have put in it. The letter had been written by captain of the English army and his name was Jim Macpherson. He had written it to his wife, Connie. The name of the wife was Connie. A wonderful incident had happened on the warfield, on the Christmas day. Jim Macpherson had narrated it in his letter. What he narrated? He has narrated the incident which was happened in the battlefield. So the English and the German were at war. This is the incident which was happened there. The two armies stood in their respective trenches on the two sides of the no man's land. Suddenly, Macpherson saw someone waving a white flag from the enemy side. Then he saw many soldiers calling out to them. They were wishing a happy Christmas to the English soldiers. And do you remember what was the name of English soldiers? Yes, it was Tommy. They were called out Tommy. Some English soldiers shouted back, "Same to you." The English thought that was all. To their surprise, they saw many German moving towards them, and the captain was alarmed. It could be a trick. They were thinking that it might be a trick, but it was not. They were bringing them German wine and canned meat. Now there were no riffles between the soldiers. They were hugging one another, and the officer moves towards Macpherson. They shook hands very warmly. Then the German officer said that he was from Dusseldorf and that he played cello in the orchestra. He gave his name as Hans Wolf. In return, Macpherson also introduced himself. He said that he was a school teacher from Dorset. Children, let's read out page number 12. Captain Jim Macpherson, I replied, and a happy Christmas to you too. I am a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. Ah, Dorset, he smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. We shared my rum, ration, and his excellent sauces, and we talked. Connie, how we talked! We spoke almost perfect English. But it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset, never even been to England. He had learned all he knew of England from a school and from reading books in English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. So, out there in no man's land, we talked about Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and students. Who are Bathsheba, Gabriel Oak, and Sergeant Roy? They are the fictional character from the book Far from the Madding Crowd. So, and Dorset, he had a wife and one son, born just 6 months ago. As I looked about me, there were huddles of khaki. Huddles means groups of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land, smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating. Hans Wolf and I shared what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake, Connie. He thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. What is marzipan? A sweet covering on a cake made from sugar, eggs, and almonds. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. There never was a Christmas party like it, Connie. Then someone, I don't know who, out a football, greatcoats. So who are referred to greatcoats here? They are the German soldiers. So greatcoats were dumped in piles to make goalpost, and the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Fritz out in the middle of no man's land. Hans Wolf and I looked on, cheered, clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. There was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. He saw it too and smiled. Jim McPherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve this war. A football match. No one dies in a football match. No children are orphaned. No wives become widows. So, let's see the explanation of this page. Here Hansel smiled and he said he knew Dorset. In fact, he had never been to England, but he knew English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book was Far from the Madding Crowd, and it was from there he had learnt all about the Dorset. Macpherson shared with Hans Wolf the Christmas cake his wife had sent for him, and Hans Wolf said that the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. It was a wonderful party. Then a soldier brought out a football. The soldiers played while Macpherson and Hans Wolf clapped and cheered. Hans Wolf suggested that the world would be much better if the problems were resolved by a football match instead of war. Children, let's read out next page. I would prefer cricket, I told him. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning probably. We laughed at that, and together we watched the game, set to say Coney. Fritz won, 2-1. But as Hans Wolf generously said, our goals was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished, the schnapps and the rum and the sauces had long since run out. The meaning of the phrase long since run out means consumed long back. And we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. I think that is what every soldier wants, on both sides. Hans Wolf said, Take care, Jim McPherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly, I felt. He turned to wave just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey-coated men drifting back. The meaning of drifting is going back towards their trenches. That night, back in our dugouts, trenches, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. It was Still Nacht, Silent Night. Still Nacht is a German word. Ab gave them a rousing chorus of While Shepherd Watched. We exchanged carols for a while and then we all fell silent. We had had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So children, let's see the explanation of this part. After the football match, all the drinks and eatables were consumed. Now it was time to part. Hans Wolf saluted Macpherson and walked away slowly and unwillingly. That night the Germans were heard singing a carol. English troops replied with a rousing chorus of another carol. They exchanged carols for a while and then it was all silence. Macpherson wrote in his letter that he would treasure those moments all his life. Students, let's see page number 14. Dearest Coney, by Christmas time next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. The meaning of distance is far off. Armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon. I'm sure of it. Your loving Jim. Now let's see the third part of the chapter, and that is the last part too. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into its envelope. I kept awake all night. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy, walking his dog, where Copper Witches was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell. The roof capping, the windows boarded up. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of a Mrs. Macpherson. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. He knew her. A lovely old lady, he told me, a bit muddle-headed, Muddle-headed means confused. But at her age, she was entitled to be this, wasn't she? 101 years old. She had been in the house when it caught fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she always thought electricity was too expensive. The fireman had got her out just in time. She was in a nursing home now. He told me Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of town. So, let's see the explanation. Macpherson handed the letter, hoping that the war would end soon, and both armies longed for peace, and he was sure they would be together again. And having read the letter, the author put it back in the envelope, and he decided to give the letter back to whom it belonged. The address was of Bridport, Dorset. So he drove to that place. The house number 12 turned out to be a burnt out shell, and it was found that Mrs. Macpherson was in the house when it caught fire. The fireman had got her about just in time. She was 101 years old. Now she was in a nursing home. Children, let's read out page number 15. I found Burlington House nursing home easily enough. There were paper chains up in the hallway, and lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with the lopsided angle on top. I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. Macpherson to bring her Christmas present. I could see through into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. The matron had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. She even offered me a mince pie. She walked me along the corridor. Mrs. Macpherson is not in with the others. She told me she is rather confused today, so we thought it best if she had a good rest. She has no family, you know. No one visits, so I'm sure she will be only too pleased to see you. She took me into a conservatory with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. The old lady was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. She was gazing out at the garden. "Hello," I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly. "Happy Christmas, Connie," I went on. I think it's yours." As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. That was the moment her eyes lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with a sudden glow of happiness. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. For a while she said nothing but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. Suddenly she reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest," she said, "and here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim dear, sit down." I sat down beside her and she kissed my cheek. "I read your letter so often, Jim, every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me, and now you are. Now you are back. You can read it yourself. Would you do that for me, Jim dear? I just want to hear your voice again. I'd love that so much. And then perhaps we will have some tea. I've made you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan all around. I know how much you love marzipan." By Michael Morpurgo. So children, you can see how the chapter is finished with very sentimental issue. Here the author went to the nursing home. He met the matron. She told the author that Mrs. Macpherson was rather confused that day. They had put her in a conservatory. The author found Mrs. Macpherson sitting in chair. Naturally, she looked up at the author vacantly, but her eyes lit up when he called her Connie and gave her the letter. He told her how he had got the letter, but she was not listening to him. She reached out and took his hand. eyes were filled with tears. She felt that her Jim had returned. She said that her Jim had kept his promise. He had returned on the eve of Christmas. She made him sit beside her. She kissed his cheek. She talked long and lovingly to him. She said that she had got the best Christmas present in the world. Children, don't you think the last scene or the last paragraph brings tears in our eyes? It is very sentimental, very emotional, very touching scene. As Connie must have kept the letter for her husband for quite a long, she must have read it so often. She would have received that letter when she was young, and now when she received the letter from author, she was 101 years old. It shows that Connie might have kept the letter very quite long. Children, what do you think? What is Connie's Christmas present, and why is it the best Christmas present in the world? Connie thinks that Jim has returned from war. She mistakes the author from Jim. She has been waiting for Jim for so long, and when the author wishes her Merry Christmas, she thinks it is Jim and calls that homecoming of Jim's is the best Christmas present for her. So students, hope my videos are providing you a helping hand in your better understanding. If so, thanks for watching. Stay home and save lives. Thank you.